The Machinist has been through a tumultuous existence since it was released in the Final Fantasy XIV Heavensward expansion. As the second ranged physical DPS introduced, the developers felt inclined to build a class with a similar supportive nature to the Bard, the first ranged DPS, and in so doing, neglected the gunslinger gadgeteer's true nature. Well, in FF14 Shadowbringers, the Machinist is much closer to what it's supposed to be, and today I'm going to talk through my impressions of its 5.0 rework. Let's get started. First things first, I am enjoying the 5.0 Machinist a lot. It is fast, it is action-packed, it does a hell of a lot of damage, and it's very complex. All of the different moving pieces within the Machinist aren't difficult on their own, but when you combine them together, they make a very intricate machine that can be tricky to use at its optimum efficiency. With that said, I'm glad the Machinist feels that way. I don't want every class or job in Final Fantasy to be easy. It's important for the game to have variety not just in the way jobs play, but in how easily you can master them. And the Machinist takes a lot of work to master. Some people might say all you need is a good internet connection, but I personally believe it's a little bit more than that. You have to pay attention to all the different resources that you have at your disposal and use them at the correct times. What exactly are those resources? Well, there are the two class-specific resources, the heat gauge and the battery gauge. You have your 1-2-3 combo, which is used to build both of those resources. Hits number 1 and 2 of the 1-2-3 combo build the heat gauge. Hit number 3 builds heat and battery. You have the weapon skill Air Anchor, which generates battery gauge. You have to use this on a 40-second cooldown. There's another ability called Drill that just deals a buttload of damage. You have to use that every time it's available or you're wasting damage. Going back to the battery gauge, that is used to summon your turret or at level 80, the Automaton Queen. This summons an autonomous robot that does a buttload of damage until its duration is over, at which point it will use a finishing move. We also have Hypercharge, the mechanic that is connected to the heat gauge. The heat gauge can hold a total of 100 heat. Hypercharge only costs 50. The reasons for that make a bit more sense when you start playing the Machinist. The Hypercharge ability, when activated, gives you access to two new weapon skills that each have a 1.5 second global cooldown, as opposed to the traditional 2.5 seconds. Auto Crossbow is an area attack. Heat Blast is a single target attack that reduces the cooldown of your two off-global cooldown abilities, Gauss Round and Ricochet. Ricochet is an area attack, Gauss Round is a single target attack. Each of those abilities has 3 charges, each charge takes 30 seconds to refill. A little bit of quick math, when you activate Hypercharge you can use Heat Blast 5 times for a total of 75-second cooldown reduction. The total cooldown for Gauss Round and Ricochet is 90 seconds. You see where I'm going with this? There's a lot of stuff going on here with the Machinist. There are a lot of different moving pieces that you have to think about at every moment of gameplay, and then you have to worry about not standing in stuff that'll kill you. So, I have rambled quite a bit about the different things that you can do with the Machinist, and I want to make sure to talk about some things that are a little bit on the frustrating side with the job. There are a lot of actions to press. The Machinist is one of the highest action per minute jobs in the game, and it is all because of Gauss Round and Ricochet and Heat Blast. You are constantly spamming these abilities, and spamming is the perfect word for it. You're bam, 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 bam. It can get a little bit tiresome, a little bit monotonous. There are moments when I just want to sit back and breathe and rest a little bit, but that's not what the Machinist is about. It's about fast-paced action. Another issue with the Machinist is the Automaton Queen itself, though I do enjoy the fact that it is an autonomous ability. You activate it and it just does what it's supposed to do. It feels a little bit clunky. When you activate it, it has a 20-second duration, but it doesn't start attacking until about 5 seconds into its duration, so its total uptime is really only 15 seconds. So, in an ideal world, the summoning animation for the Automaton Queen won't count towards the total duration of the ability. The final issue with the Machinist is something that can be managed, but if you're into really high-end optimizations and bleeding edge rating, then this will be something that frustrates you quite a bit. And that's the interaction with Heat Blast, the hypercharged single target ability, and Ricochet and Gauss Round. While you're in the hypercharged state, ideally you want to weave Ricochet or Gauss Round in between every Heat Blast. But if you have too much latency, then you won't get to use the correct number of heat blasts during hypercharge. You can use a total of 5 if your latency is messed up and you're using heat blast, ricochet, heat blast, gauss round, heat blast, ricochet, heat blast, gauss round. You might not get to use all 5 heat blasts, and that's a problem. The way I've been getting around this issue is only using hypercharge and heat blast if all of my charges of ricochet and gauss round have been spent. I haven't found a huge detriment from doing things this way, and overall the class feels fine when playing that way, but I can understand why people are still upset with the mechanic overall. The main reason I personally am frustrated by this latency issue is that there's nothing I can do about it on my end to fix things besides plugging directly into the Square Enix servers. The one thing you can't control about your skill level and your damage output with the class is the internet connection, and that can be a little bit frustrating, but overall, the Machinist feels amazing. All of the skills look cool, they sound great, they do a hell of a lot of damage, and the job takes mastery. It takes time to learn how everything works together, but once you do, your damage is going to be unmatched by a large majority of the game's cast, and that feels pretty cool. To give my final closing thoughts, I think the Machinist is in a fantastic place. It is a high action per minute range DPS. It's got a couple of really big hard-hitting abilities, those feel great too. The Automaton Queen has a few kinks that need to be ironed out, but overall, the job, it works. All of the moving pieces, they make sense, and when they start turning right, things feel great. I can totally understand if there are people that are frustrated with the changes that were made to the Machinist, but overall I find them to be enjoyable, and I was somebody that enjoyed the previous iterations of the job. There is one more thing that I suppose I should touch on, and that is the wildfire mechanic that went through some changes. In its original form, you would apply wildfire to a target and it would last for a certain duration, and all the damage you dealt within that duration was calculated, and wildfire would deal damage equal to a percentage of that total. Now, wildfire still applies to a target for a duration, but it deals increased damage based on the number of weapon skills that you land during the time that it's active. It's a lot simpler, it's a lot more streamlined, and people that enjoyed the old way of doing things, which was apply wildfire, roll face across keyboard, press all the buttons, and profit, now it's just a little bit more streamlined, a little bit more basic. You don't have to work as hard to fit a ridiculous number of abilities into a small window of time. That, for me, I think is one of the biggest improvements to the job, because I didn't like so much trying to cram everything into that little tiny space. Now, I just know exactly how many weapon skills I can fit in the duration of wildfire. I do it, and it works. With all of that said, I give the Machinist very high marks. I'm enjoying it a lot, and I'm looking forward to playing it more. On that note, though, we are going to wrap things up here by saying, if you enjoyed this video and you'd like to support the channel more than you already do just by watching, liking, subscribing, and commenting, you can head over to patreon.com/iBluairJgR to become a patron. As always, the name of the game is Final Fantasy XIV Shadowbringers. The name of the channel is iBluairJgR. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.